Episode 31.
Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Finance Podcast, your training resource for being a happy, healthy, and wealthy dad.
Hey everyone, this is Seth. Today we have Dave Lucas on the show. He's the host of the Misfit Entrepreneur Podcast. He has a really impressive rap sheet in terms of the companies he's been involved with and what he's doing now, actually. We're going to talk to him a little bit today about mindset and how to have the mindset to survive in the entrepreneurial world where you're going to have roller coasters of highs and lows. He also has a really interesting adoption story, so we'll talk a little bit about that because personally I don't know much about adoption. Well, all right, let's get right to it. Hey Dave, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's awesome to be on with you and awesome to be on with all of you in the audience.
That's great. I'm so glad to have you, man. I love your show. And let's talk a little bit about Hannah. How old is Hannah right now?
Hannah's 5, so
wow.
She'll turn 6 coming up here this summer.
Are you having a blast with her? I mean, that's a really fun age. I have the same age, and so I know it's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, every day she's a little fireball. So basically from the time she gets up to the time she passes out, essentially, it's 100 miles an hour. There's no in between, So she's a lot of fun. So there's always something we're getting into, always something going on, always something new she's learning every day. So that's the fun part of it.
Is anything different about fatherhood than you expected?
I don't know if it's so much different. I think it's a constant journey, like anything, and you are always learning as the parent. One of my really good friends, actually one of my best business partners, said to me before we adopted Hannah, "Don't change who you are." And I really took that to heart. And I've been conscious of that as, becoming a father and raising a child, to be conscious to remember, who I am in the process and to make sure that I stay true to, my beliefs, my core values and all that stuff as we've done that. And that's actually, I think, made a big difference in, myself and working to raise her and help her, as she grows too. So we'll talk about mindset, but I'm really hyper aware to the conditioning of ourselves as individuals. And that goes with, a child ever since they're born on up. So for me, it hasn't been like some big surprising, like, oh my God, I never expected any of this type of stuff. It was more of like, I'm going to be myself, but what new can I learn? How can I become a better version of me as I go through this? And that's what Hannah's helped me do, which has been something I guess I didn't expect as much.
It is true. You could likely lose your kind of personal identity and be wrapped up in her so much that, you'd lose yourself, and probably wouldn't be healthy for her either, because it would be all about her instead of maybe letting her develop her own personality and life, I guess.
Well, it's not even that. You know this. When you become a parent, all of a sudden everybody who's a parent thinks, they know what's best for you. And they start telling you, this is what you need to do, and that's what you need to do, and instead of letting you find some of that on your own, And I think one of the things we've done really well is be able to take, a lot of that advice, especially being adoptive parents. It's a little different, I guess. People, well, this is what you need to do with her. This is how you need to do things with her. And it's like, really? Because have you ever adopted a child before or gone through that? And so, staying true to the core, listening and saying, okay, and weighing things and saying, hey, is this actually useful, or is this something that, maybe they just weren't thinking when they were talking? It's been been an interesting thing to go through.
Yeah, I recently told someone who was pregnant that, I was like, the secret to being a parent or something to realize is that none of us knew what we were doing, when we started out. And we're just all learning on the job.
Yeah, we still don't.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit about the adoption story.
Sure. Hannah's story is kind of a really, really cool story. Anytime you go through an adoption, it's different for everybody. We went down the path of adopting Hannah. Hannah was in China, and adopting internationally is different than the States. The States, it's pretty hard to adopt in the States that we found. And so after kind of weighing the different things we wanted to do and, how fast we could adopt and everything else, we went the route of China, where the program was really solid there and everything else. And For us, my wife and I are basically 10% of the population are considered unexplained. Like everything works properly, but we can't have children naturally. So we'd always actually wanted to adopt. We had gone down the path of learning about it and everything. We were going to have natural kids, adopted kids, and all that stuff. And so it just, once we found out that that wasn't the path, we shifted, straight towards adoption. And anybody who's ever gone through the adoption process, this is going to sound really bad, but the best way I can explain it, it's like a life enema. They go, like every single, like if everybody had to go through what we had to go through to be parents, you probably wouldn't have half the problems that you have in today's world. I mean, social workers at the house, fire department checking you out, psychological evaluations, homeland security. I mean, everything you have to go through. And that takes about 18 months to go through and do all that. And, so we go through all that, and then the way that China works, and really the rest of the world works like this, is that they do what's called files. So a file is like a dossier on a child. And so every month a certain amount of files are released to the world, essentially, and it's kind of first come, first served in the pecking order, right? So for about 5 months, we didn't even get to see a file. After we were approved to adopt. And, it's an interesting thing that when you go through the process, one of the things you have to do is you actually have to go through, in our case, there were 2 programs for China. There was what's called a Healthy Child program, which is a child that the Chinese deem to be pristine, perfect. They literally match their eye color to you and everything. And that is typically almost 7 years to go through that program to get a child. Then there's what's called the Waiting Child program. And the Waiting Child program is a child that is deemed to be not pristine, not perfect. It could be missing the tip of a finger, and that's not perfect, right? More often, it's other ailments, things like, disease like syphilis or club feet or cleft palate, a lot of heart conditions, and things like that. And so as we were going through our process, one of the hardest things was we had to literally go through a checklist of all the ailments that we would accept. And it's a really an emotional roller coaster because you go through all those thoughts like, oh, if I don't check something, am I a bad person? Am I not willing to accept this? And does that make me, is that wrong? And so, we went through all of that. And one of the things that was on the sheet was hyper and hypothyroid. Now, we have family members that have that. And basically, it's the way to correct that or keep that in sync is that you take a pill to regulate your thyroid gland. And so my wife checks those boxes, and our adoption counselor goes, hey, you check hyperthyroid. We've never had a kid, ever have that. Are you sure you want that on there? And we're like, yeah, just leave it on. Why not? We'll just leave it on. And so, flash forward, we get to the end of the 5 months of, the files, and we get a call out of the blue. I remember really vividly. It's like middle of October, and the files for the month had already come out. We didn't even get to see one. It's kind of, it's really disheartening every time they did, and you didn't even get to see one. And we get this call out of the blue from our adoption counselor. And she's like, we have a child for you. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you have a child for us? So, the file's already done for the month and all that. And she's like, well, we just happen to work directly with this one orphanage in all of the country of China. And they typically deal with older kids, but this little one was left underneath a bridge about 100 yards away from the orphanage as an infant, and she's now about 8 months old, and she has hyperthyroid, and you're the only family in our system when we went through that came up willing to accept hyperthyroid. Wow. And we're like, well, yeah, give us the file. So, we got the file that day, and the way it works, you get 72 hours to make your decision. Well, we made our decision at about 0.1 seconds as soon as we saw our pretty little face in the file. And that was that, 6 months later, we were, over in China, becoming a family. And so when people ask me, why'd you go to China to get your daughter? I say, because that's where she was. If you hear that story, it's very serendipitous. There's everything had to happen exactly as it did. And, she never went on the list. The world never knew about her,
Wow.
And, it was like she was meant specifically for us. So, I call it a higher power. Other people can call it what it wants and stuff. But but it was meant to be. And, the other interesting fact is, we got home, and within 6 months after getting home and going to the doctors and everything with her, they actually took her off her thyroid medicine and said she was actually misdiagnosed. She should have been a waiting child or a healthy child.
Wow.
She should have been, in a healthy child program. So, again, it's, things happen as they're supposed to. I've developed this philosophy over the years of the fact that, I don't have regrets on things. Now, there are things that I've learned great lessons from that if I had a chance to do them again, I definitely would use those lessons and do them differently, but I don't regret going through and doing what I've done, because every single thing that I've done, good, bad, everything in between, has led me to this exact point where I'm talking to you. I wouldn't have Hannah, I wouldn't have my wife, I wouldn't have any of the stuff or the, been through the experiences or the partnerships or the relationships, any of that type of stuff that I have, at this point in life. And so, something I always talk about with people, because I think, we get very mired in our day to day, and, we don't take a step back and just look at the miracle that we are even here. I mean, literally, a rock goes the wrong way in space, or a soldier steps the wrong way on a battlefield in history, and you're not here. The mere, chance that you exist is so infinitesimal. I mean, you just, enjoy what you have, because, for you to be here, so many others that could have been aren't. And that's something that's become a kind of a philosophy that I live by.
I imagine when you saw her for the first time, was it like this rush of emotions and just sheer, I don't know, stuff that's hard to explain? And this is kind of how I felt with our babies in the natural birth. We're in the zone and having the baby, right? And I'm right there. I'm not having it physically, I guess. And then you see the baby for the first time. It's like this rush of emotions. I imagine it's pretty much the exact same thing for you with the first time you, I guess, walk into the adoption agency or wherever you went.
Well, it is in completely different ways. So from China's aspect, and I understand this now, but the way that it works is on the day that you're to get your child, you go into a room, they walk out, they hand her to you, and they abruptly leave.
Wow.
So it's like they just hand them and walk away, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like clean separation, done. And I understand that clean break, now having been through it and stuff, but it's like, oh my God, we're parents now. Now what do we do, And I still remember my wife, carrying this child out, the child's in Hannah's in utter shock. She doesn't know what to think. She doesn't know what's going on. She's 18 months old. Everything she knows just left, and there are these two strangers now that she's walking out with. I mean, think about that for a child, at that age, right? And it also goes to show how resilient kids are. So we get home or to our hotel room. We set her on the bed. She's wearing the 3 pairs of pants and 3 shirts that she lived in. They had her in all of it. And we set her on the bed. She looks at us. We look at her. We look at each other. We look back at her. We look at each other again. And it's the look of, what do we do now? Then you just figure it out. All parents go through that, and you just figure it out. So it was a really surreal experience. But 18 months old, she had no teeth. She couldn't walk. She, didn't have a lot of that because just the Chinese orphanage in the rural area of the country, she just didn't have access to nutrition or any of that type of stuff. They did the best they could. And by the time we left, it's pretty amazing. Sure. This is amazing what nourishment nutrition can do. She started to have teeth started to come in, had her walking up and down the hallway in the hotel, and all that stuff. Now that's the other thing. Talk about lessons for life, business, things like that. You've got to be prepared for anything, because from an adopted standpoint, you have all ends of the spectrum, right? It can be the worst case scenario, where the child doesn't at all attach to you, doesn't want anything to do with you, cries all night long, emotionally is just not ready for you. Then there's the other end of the spectrum where takes you right away and everything's hunky-dory, right? So you have to be prepared for that and everything in between. But I was not prepared for what actually happened. So what happened with Hannah is there I am. I expect her to probably reject me. You know, I'm the man. You know, she's used to being with women, that sort of thing, because her nannies were women and all that. She immediately rejects my wife and clings to me. So there I am, having to figure out this kid. I literally, if I put her down, she cried. So I had to hold her everywhere we went. And now I've got my wife who has wanted to be a mother so bad for a number of years now, frantically distraught. So I'm having to play psychologist over here. I'm having to play mom over here. And so it was just such a great lesson for just, you have to be prepared for anything. And when it happens, you can't panic. You just figure it out and you methodically work through it. And that's a lesson that served me in business really well, right? When you just react out of emotion, and this kind of gets into the mindset side of things, without thinking, you know, it can cause a lot of issues. But when you just take a second to stop and just think logically through what needs to be done, you can really overcome most anything, you know. And so, you know, it went on like that almost the whole time. In fact, my Hannah did not bond with her mother until we actually got back to the States. So it was a few weeks that we went through that. But it was funny in that process, we kind of came up with, you know, all right, look, I'm comfort, your sustenance, I said to my wife. So every meal my wife fed her, and I held her, and I said, look, push comes to shove, people will sacrifice comfort for sustenance any day of the week. So eventually this will work out. And it did. And then, we got back, and then, you know, she just walks up to my wife like the day later and puts her arms up, and my wife picked her up, and that was it. I was chopped liver at that point. It's all those two now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that story of little Hannah, and that adoption's pretty remarkable. It's pretty mind-blowing. So career-wise, can you kind of catch us up to how you got here? I mean, I know you've got a pretty interesting and kind of a long, you know, I guess, variety. I guess you got a lot of variety in your career, it seems like. So.
Gosh, okay. Where to start? I started my first business when I was 5, no joke. Actually, it's kind of funny. I had this idea to sell American flags to the neighbors. And so my mom helped me make American flags out of construction paper and all that stuff. I threw my little red wagon and went up and down the street selling American flags, 5-10 cents a piece, and 100% close rate. You know, the cute little 5-year-old kid comes up selling American flags, everybody's buying. And I get to the last house on the block, and it's that quintessential house, right? A little darker, the shades are always down, you don't see the people out and all that stuff. Knock on the door, and you know, a little bit of time passes, and this little old lady, you know, older lady, opens the door, very sweet looking and everything, and you know, I do my little pitch and everything, and you know, I'm selling American flags, and she just deadpan, like waits a second, just deadpan, says, "No, thank you, honey, we're Canadian," and slams the door in my face. And so, first stab at rejection, but overcame it, went back, made it a Canadian flag, went back and sold it to him. So that was my first foray into entrepreneurship, and I was fortunate. Half my family were entrepreneurs growing up. The other half actually grew up dirt poor. All made it out. All were, you know, successful in their own way and stuff. So that's kind of unique influences. But kept starting things, trying things all through high school and stuff. Got into direct sales. That's how I paid for college and all that, and then parlayed that into another business. When I left college, I helped the business come to market in Columbus, Ohio, which brought me there. And, you know, and then after about a year of that, you know, I failed miserably. Learned a lot of lessons in that. And, you know, well, look, you know, failure is if you accept it. But, you know, it was a direct sales business with residual, you know, type income, and at the end of a year, I was making like $800 or $1,000 a month, right? So I was working 3 other jobs to make ends meet. Had a nice, hey, $1,000 residual income was cool, but for putting your full effort into it for a year, you know, for me, you know, it's not where I thought I'd be, right? So I learned my lessons from that, took my lumps, licked my wounds, went into the corporate world, because I had this crazy idea that I was going to run a Fortune 500 or build one someday. So I got on the ground floor to Fortune 500, worked my way up, had a knack for sales, so ended up being like the rookie of the year sales rep, and then rep of the year, and moved fast tracked into management as they would do, you know, for somebody like that, and took my lumps there, you know. Learned pretty quickly that my way wasn't the highway when it came to managing. And figured out how to have some better empathy and learn to lead and that stuff. And then while I was doing that, I was still starting other businesses and stuff, and met my business partner in Grass Technologies, Eric Mueller, during that time. And he had this idea to build what is now Grass Technologies. And so we got together on it, and I kind of started off as a consultant with him and helped him because he needed help building a business plan to sell the products and stuff, and he didn't really have that experience. So I brought that to the table, and then that was 15 years ago almost. And now Grass is a multi-million-dollar company doing business in over 100 countries, Inc. 5000 list, Entrepreneur 360 list, and all that fun stuff. But along the way, I've also started some other things, the investing side, small hedge funds, things like that. The podcast, which you mentioned, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a really, really fun thing to do over the last few years, and I'm just amazed at how fast that has grown, and how much people like what we're doing there. So, that's kind of the story in 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. You covered a lot of ground quickly, so nice work. Now, I know, from my own personal experience, at least for me, the entrepreneur route and businesses can feel a lot like a roller coaster with some extreme highs and you're feeling great, and then kind of some extreme lows. Have you had kind of a similar experience? And is that, like, for me, during those lows, that's when I figured out I personally need to, work on my mindset and I guess work on self-development, really, because things were really tough, really harder for me than when I just had a job, to be honest.
Yeah, that's the entrepreneurship game. Actually, I was reading an article today by Gary Vaynerchuk, who was basically saying, look, everybody thinks they can just go start a business, and it's true. 99% of businesses fail. If you start a business, you're probably going to fail. Meaning the business is not going to survive, right? And so, there's, just in Grass alone, there's times, I can't count the number of times that we were one day away from closing the doors, whether it was a cash flow issue or just technological issue, systems being down type thing or whatever over the years, but somehow, we made it through it. I think it kind of comes back to, that in that moment is when entrepreneurs can be their best, and that's when you don't focus on what you can't control. You focus on the things you can control, and you just methodically go through and fix the problem, and that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur, because there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be issues. Every level you get to, has its own set. At a $250,000 company, you have issues. At a $500,000 company, you have issues, but they're different. At a $1 million company, they're totally different. At a $10 million company, they're radically different. But, the bigger the problems that you can grow yourself to solve, the bigger your business can get. And the bigger you'll grow with that. And so that's kind of a constant challenge of the entrepreneur. It's when somebody gets complacent or gets comfortable and just is, not willing to grow themselves further or allow themselves to be pushed to grow further. That's when you see a business stagnate. Just kind of stay where it's at, So, so that's the journey of an entrepreneur that you have to go through. And it goes back to, I've narrowed this down to 3 things. Now from doing the podcast, interviewing all these high performers all over the world in their fields, as well as just kind of analyzing, how we've made it, and other stories and stuff. There's 3 things that it comes down to, that I found. And it's this. It's discipline, consistency, and persistence. DCP. And I'm actually writing a book about this right now. Look, discipline is doing the things that you need to do but don't want to, right? Yeah. Consistency is doing that day in and day out. And then persistence is busting through the barriers that get in your way. So, look, you can be disciplined for one day, right? But one day is not going to make the difference. Now, you can be disciplined and you can be consistent, being disciplined day in, day out. But if you aren't willing to do what needs to be done to go through the barrier when you hit it, you just stay at that barrier, right? You can't go to the next level. So you have to have all 3. You have to be disciplined, you have to be consistent in your discipline, and you have to be willing to persist to climb that wall when you get it, or tunnel under it, or blow it up, or whatever you need to do to get through that wall and figure it out. You have to, that's the failure thing, right? You hit these walls in a business, and you just have to find all the different ways to attack it and keep trying the different ways to get over that hill, because chances are your first 5 aren't going to work, and you just have to keep innovating and thinking and, tinkering at it until you make it happen. And that's the persistence. But if you put all those 3 together and you look at the businesses that you admire, look at the people that you think are successful, look at that, you'll see that at the core they do those things. And that's something that I think is one of the biggest lessons I've learned from just the last, several years, and doing the podcast, talking with people that are, really, successful on a daily business and are consistently successful.
Yeah, one thing, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but failure is something you really have to redefine in your head, I feel like, when you have your own business. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's so many cliches around failure, nowadays, because everybody's got their own shtick on things. But look, if you can't handle it, then you're probably not cut out to be an entrepreneur. If you can't handle going through, putting all the work in, thinking you do everything right, only to have it blow up in your face and not go as planned and stuff. If you can't handle that and take a step back and say, well, I'm just going to have to figure another way to do this, it's tough to be an entrepreneur. The biggest thing, and this is part of that cliche, but it's true, is, you learn from failing. You don't learn so much from the wins, you learn from the failures. Mm-hmm. If you're willing and open to it, right? If you're willing to say, okay, what did we do wrong that we can learn from and really change on the next go around? And that's the key. That's part of the persistence part, But you gotta take the lesson. You gotta learn. You gotta eat the humble pie. Yeah, that's tough for some people to do.
So one thing that I hear a lot about, as I would say, the self-development or self-improvement world of reading and mindset and all these things is pretty new to me, because when I had a corporate job, I just did my job and I felt like I was good at it and everything went great. But, once I had a business, it was kind of really pushing me. So I had to, expand myself. And one thing that I keep hearing successful people talk about or I read about is gratitude. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, I've started to practice it a lot more in the last month, and it's had a great improvement in my mood and my mental toughness. Have you had a similar experience, or is that something that you heard about or finally had to try out for yourself?
Yeah, I've actually had a practice for years that I call my morning prime, where I actually I have a journal. I write 3 things that I'm grateful for going into that day, and then I write my 3 to thrive, my 3 most important things for the day, and I say a little prayer to kind of kick off the day, meditate a little bit. It takes about 10 minutes. And the whole point of that is, it's not to check the box. I think a lot of people would say, I need to have a gratitude exercise. So they get up and they check the box every day after a little while, The key to it is it helps your state. So, your state is, how you approach things, the state of your mind, the state of your day, and how you're approaching your day and all that. So if you truly think it through, but every morning I really look for, when I'm writing down what I'm grateful for, I really look for things that are truly meaningful, It's not just like, hey, I'm grateful that I, have good handwriting. It's not things like that, right? It's things that I really have to think on to put me in that state. And I found that's what works really for me. Versus just, okay, I check the box. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I woke up today. Great. All right. Move on. Which is where a lot of people get to. They do the practice, but it doesn't really help them because they don't really kind of center themselves on it the way they need to. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the important thing, with gratitude. But it's a great exercise. Think about it logically. Why wouldn't it be, right? Why wouldn't it be good for you to think about, talking about the no regrets conversation and the stuff that we did earlier, the fact that we're even here right now is a miracle. We should be grateful, on a daily basis. Right. So it's a good exercise for you. And that does help in go to the state of the mind, right? So I know you mentioned mindset. So if you want, we can kind of go through that next as that's kind of a passion of mine. But, So what do you want to talk about around mindset?
First, I'll say, just for the listeners, the gratitude thing is something that me and my wife started doing about maybe 60 days ago, and it really has improved I think, our life even together. And it's one of those things. I'm a straight-laced guy. I don't know if this was the same for you, Dave. Like I'm a straight-laced guy, so when I hear something like that, I'm like, it sounds a little hippie to me, a little hippity-dippity, and I just wasn't on board to try it. But after, you can only hear successful people say something so many times before you have to try it, and also it's free to try.
Blues, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well said. I've heard you mention the subconscious, and I feel like that's one thing that gratitude does is it kind of puts us in a great state and to find the best part of the day and not let something at work, a challenge, get the best of us.
Mm-hmm.
I heard you mention subconscious on your show. Like, is that a real thing that can, I guess, improve your day or maybe be changed? And
oh yeah.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is actually, the reason I guess I'm so passionate about this is where I found one of my biggest breakthroughs when I understood this. So, I'll try to keep it as short as I can to help you guys get it. But here's the deal. From the moment you're born, you're conditioned to be who you are. And it's a hard thing for some people to take, right? Mm-hmm. But if you think about it, from the moment you're born, parents, friends, media, culture, society, religion, school, influences are shaping how you think and who you are. Okay? And so that becomes your baselines as you move into becoming your own and becoming an adult and all that stuff. And so what happens is that a lot of the things that we do in our lives, a lot of the ways that we react to things or that we view things are actually coming from influences that aren't even us. And so, have you ever had a situation where you stopped and you say, gosh, why did I do that? It didn't make any sense. That's probably a conditioning that, came from somewhere else. So, this is a big thing for people is to understand that we've got two minds, right? We've got a conscious mind, right? That, that's what we actually think to do things, and everything else. But then there's the subconscious mind, which is really the animalistic part of us, but it's the strongest and powerful part of our brain that controls us without even knowing it. I mean, how much do you think to brush your teeth or throw a ball or drive a car or even respond when you're asked a question or, in a situation, right? Where does that come from? That all comes from our subconscious mind, basically looking at that conditioning, looking at similar situations in the past that you've had and the responses that you've developed for it and then using that and responding. And the thing is that 99% of the time, most people respond out of emotion, right? And that's where you get that, gosh, why did I do that? That was the wrong response. It wasn't the way I should have handled that. All that stuff happens because of that. And so one of the biggest secrets to successful people, and they either figure this out or they naturally are really good at it, is they learn to understand this conditioning and be able to essentially program themselves and control what's in their subconscious and their reactions and their responses to things. So I'll give you an example. Money is a very emotional subject, right? And a lot of people have very specific conditioning to how they treat money. So if you say things like money doesn't grow on trees or filthy rich or whatever it is that you say about money, whatever the phrases that, you listening, are thinking about right now, oh, I say this or that, ask yourself, where did that come from? Did you come up with that on your own and say, yes, this is what I want to be stating about money? Chances are you didn't. Chances are you just say it because you heard it from your parents or somebody growing up. And the question you have to ask yourself is those statements holding you back? Because nobody comes out of the womb and they go, hey, beautiful baby, too bad they'll never make more than $35,000.
Right.
Your conditioning limits you to levels. And in order to get higher and be able to grow, you have to be able to overcome those levels by reprogramming yourself. So, for example, you have to be able to recognize that and be able to say, wait, is that something that I choose to say or think? Because you know what? Money actually does grow on trees. Let me explain. I can write a book right now. I can put it up on Amazon. I can start selling it, and I can create money out of thin air. Money grows on trees. Money grows. Money's a tool, and it's out there. You can create it out of a million things right now without even spending any money. So it's a different way of understanding your thought process and stuff. And so, awareness is the catalyst to change. So hopefully hearing that, maybe it's made you aware a little bit and said, maybe there's things that I do or say that maybe I don't believe, that maybe aren't really me, and maybe I need to choose to view them differently and change how I react in this situation or how I view this or that. That's the first step in it. If you can just even start doing that in one area of your life, it'll make a huge difference for you. But as much credit as we give the subconscious, it actually is pretty dumb. It's pretty rudimentary, right? It's programmed to just, when this happens, do this, right? That's how it works. And so you can reprogram it. And so there's little things that you can do in your life to help you. I'll give you a great example. I've been doing this for, almost 14 years now. I've got a board in my office. That's my attitude board, right? So I know it sounds really goofy, but every day when I walk into my office, it says on the board, it says, what type of attitude will you choose to have today? And then below it has great, fair, rapport. And every day I have to circle great, fair, rapport. Now, not once in 14 years have I ever circled fair rapport, Yeah. And it sits right across from my desk. So I'm looking at it, like right now I'm looking at it, right? So all day long I'm looking at it. So when something doesn't go right, or something doesn't, or I start to feel negative, or I start, you start to have that snowball day where something goes wrong and the next thing goes wrong and it starts to compound and all that stuff. I'm looking at this board, telling myself I chose to have a great attitude because I chose that, right? Life is really all about our choices that we make. And so that snaps me out of it. It's like a reminder that says, wait, you know what? I chose to have a good attitude. We're going to change course. We're going to do this. I can work on this. We can make something happen over here. And that gets the mind working for you instead of being debilitated by the negativity or whatever went wrong, whatever it is. It sounds like a very, it sounds very, stupid to a lot of people when they hear that. But try that for a month. And do it just like that, where you can look at it all day in front of you and see what happens. It's really amazing the change it can have for you. And then go ahead.
I think I'm gonna have to put one of those above my desk because I like it. I love the part of it where you're telling yourself, hey, you're making the choice at this moment. Whatever just happened, X, Y, Z, and you can have the choice to have a good attitude or poor, fair, whatever, and that's your choice, like you said. So I think I'm actually gonna have to try that, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, but that starts to put that into your subconscious, right? And again, the subconscious, whatever you put in front of it or whatever you tell yourself, right? The subconscious will drive you towards. And I always use this example. Cars. I remember the first time I saw an Aston Martin DB9. Now, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, right? It's not really the bastion for, luxury cars, So right. I saw an Aston Martin DB9, very distinct, on the highway, and I'm like, ooh, that's the car, right?
Yeah.
Over the next week, I saw 4 of them. I'd never seen one in Columbus. All of a sudden, I've seen 4 of them. Right? The subconscious is alert and it's looking for those things. So the subconscious is going to drive you in a direction whether you like it or not. It's just whether it's the direction you choose for. And so that's the key to understanding, how to make this work in your life and understanding how to separate yourself from the programming that you've gotten from other influences and be able to stop and ask yourself and then choose which way you want to go for your own self and live out of true choice that you control. That's the difference, and that's really what most really successful, whether it's athletes, entrepreneurs, business people, all that, have figured out in some way, shape, or form in their lives that have helped them get there.
And bouncing back to your money comment, I'll tell you what came to mind for me is save a penny, earn a penny. The first thing that comes to mind, and that's not a very compelling future, is it, right? I'm managing pennies in this scenario, and that's that's a poor mindset to have.
Well, yeah, and an exercise that I always do, when I do my talks on this, is I will ask people to write down their first response, that the first thing that pops in their mind. So, like when I say to you, when I say 6 figures, what do you think of? Quick, go, give it to me.
$100,000.
Right. Okay.
All right. The lowest number.
Lowest number, right? 6 figures is $999,999. That's 6 figures.
Yeah.
So, again, that's, where is your baseline set to? Because that tells you where you're set to. I guarantee you, whatever your answer was to that question, you're either, that's what you're making, or you're making less than that, but you're not making above it. Because your mind has you set to that level.
I love that exercise. That's really neat. So, hearing all this, I can't help but think of you and me as fathers. Like, what do we do for our kids to make sure that their mindset is good and we're not hindering them or unknowingly restricting or limiting them?
Well, that's the rub, right? Because what's the parent's favorite word? It's usually no.
Yeah.
And so, again, as I go back, awareness is the catalyst to anything, right? To change to anything. So just being aware of it and sensitive to it, it allows you to kind of catch yourself in the situations and, be able to work on it. Nobody's ever going to be perfect. I'm not even perfect. I still react, sometimes let emotions get the best of me, right? It's a constant work in progress through your whole life. So when it comes to raising, Hannah, there are certain things though that I'm very conscious around. So when I talk about abundance, when I, look at the world and I explain to her that anything's possible, I show her how that's possible. I tell her how she can understand it, to choose things, and that she, every day we do a little thing, we do the magic gummies. So she has her gummies that vitamins that she takes every day. And so, we do this thing where she, grabs them and she shakes them and everything else. And, and I say, all right, for the magic gummies, you get to state what they're going to do for you for today. What are they going to do for you? I'm going to have a great day, whatever. But that's kind of my way of helping her understand that she gets to choose how she wants to approach the day and stuff, So it's little things like that, add up over time that can make a real difference in the path of somebody's life, and, someday I guarantee you she's going to reject whatever conditioning she's gotten from me, right? In some way, shape, or form, right? So it's, that's okay. She needs to find her own way, but the fact that she'll hopefully understands that she can do it out of true choice and that, and be able to approach it that way, I'll feel accomplished, somewhat as a father if she learns how to do that.
Right. Do you have any preference when she gets out of, let's say, college, if she starts her own business or if she goes and works somewhere for a few years and then starts a business, or, do you have any thoughts on that or any scheming you've done in your mind?
No, I mean, she's got an example of me at home and my wife and stuff and things like that. So, and she'll have others, in that. I'm going to let her kind of figure out. I figured my own way out. I didn't have anybody to do that for me, and I don't think it's fair to really do it to her. So I'm going to let her, if she comes to me for guidance or any questions and stuff, I'm going to help her and, that sort of thing. But, I want her to go through that. I think it's extremely powerful for someone's life to find your way.
Well, Dave, thanks so much. Where should our listeners go to find out more about you?
Oh, well, one of the easiest places is just go to the Misfit Entrepreneur website. So www.misfitentrepreneur.com. You can, sign up for the podcast there if you want to follow it. You can connect via social. I'm on all the social media, either as Misfit Entrepreneur or Dave Lukas, Lukas. So, look me up. I'd love to hear feedback. I'd love to chat with you on any of these topics and stuff. I live for this stuff. So I always respond to, anybody that sends me notes and stuff. I always personally respond to them and stuff. So, if there's anything I can do to help you, please reach out and, I wish you the best in your journey and, the best in success.
Thanks so much, Dave. Thanks for being on, and best of luck with your new book. Is it Winning the Day?
Yeah, it's called Win the Day. So it's about halfway done right now. So I actually started it and went back and trashed it and rewrote the whole thing. So, but yeah, it's probably the next 6 to 8 weeks is when we'll probably be done with it and then moving to get it out there.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that is a wrap with Dave Lukas. I really hope you enjoyed talking to him because he's a great guy, and the subconscious versus conscious stuff is really quite interesting and something I really hadn't heard much about for the majority of my life. I was just reading a book called Principles by Ray Dalio. He's one of the most successful hedge fund managers, and he tried to take all of his principles that governed his life or his professional life and put it into this book. And he talks about the subconscious and conscious in decision making and how we have to understand that when you're managing people or dealing with people. And he calls the conscious mind your upper level brain, and then your lower level being your subconscious. And he talks about how the subconscious or the lower level really affects way more of the decision making than we even realize. And so if you're talking to someone and you're very confident about what you're talking about and the other person's just not being logical or it's not making sense, it's a good chance that they're being governed or somehow their decision or what they're saying is being skewed by their subconscious. So it's really interesting stuff. And yeah, we'll definitely have to do some thinking on how to parent our kids in a way where we're not, like Dave said, the word no all the time, right? It's kind of like we're beating them down or limiting them in that way. And maybe that's subconsciously we're conditioning them to not be as ambitious or something if we don't let them make the decision themselves or whatever. So we'll definitely have to put some thought into that and maybe compile some notes or look for some research on that topic. And yeah, the adoption story with Hannah was just incredible. It's very obvious to see that little Hannah was meant for Dave and his wife, and that was meant to be a family. So that was really touching, neat story. So I'm glad that we got to hear that. Well, all right, guys. Till next time.
Thanks for listening to the Fatherhood Fitness Finance Podcast. You can find us at fatherhoodfitnessfinance.com.